Bureau Report, DD India.
So let's discuss India's progress then in its fight against COVID-19 and also compare it with situations across the world as well. We have with us Dr. Naresh Trehan, who's joining us on Skype, Chairman of the CII Healthcare Council, and Shubham Bhattacharjee is Consulting Editor with the Business Standard, is right here with us in the studio. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. Dr. Trehan, let me start with you. This is a highly contagious infection, and given that the nature of the infection is such, we have been able to contain it. The doubling rate has vastly reduced, and the number of districts in which there is no case for the last 14 days has risen to 59. Would you say that the graded response is working well?
So the lockdown has actually helped us hugely. The decision was taken at the right time. It has helped to do two things. One is to slow down the spread of the virus.
Yes.
Then, which was very important to break the chain at some point, because otherwise the experience from around the world is hugely different than what we are experiencing, which is good. The second thing, what it's done is it has made us aware of which are the hotspots and which are the areas which we really need to concentrate on. And because it is important that we will have to open up at some point, because the economic distress is so huge, that we had to come up with the idea of when to open and how, in what graded manner we should open it. So that's why it is important that we now know which are the areas which can be opened slowly, gradually, and which are the areas which continue to be locked down, so that we do not allow the spread to go rapidly outside of those areas. So I think this is a very, very good extension that we did of the lockdown, although it has created a lot of burden on the country, which we are all gearing up to face. But from the medical point of view, it has saved, I would say, many, many, many lives and slowed down the spread, which was the purpose of the lockdown.
Right. So, Shubham Bhattacharjee, the saving of so many lives is a surplus then to the economy, if you look at it in economic terms, isn't it? Because we have many more lives, we've saved lives, we've done a lot of good that way. But the livelihoods of people are of great concern, isn't it? And with this particular aspect that we are now opening up, we have to open up, otherwise people will suffer considerably. And we know that certain areas we can open up. We've seen that a number of districts also where we can actually open up a lot. What do you think about the method of opening up and how quickly we should open up?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. But the big thing is that the lockdown has to be looked at the fact that if it had been delayed, it would have, because the lockdown would have come in any case at certain stage. Every country now, even those countries which have said that we would not go in for lockdown, have had to reverse their position and have had to come down to the lockdown.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So there's definitely a lockdown. So that lockdown, if it had been delayed, we would have actually come to it at a far more difficult position. We would have had to take far more difficult challenges, and it would have created more disruption for the economy. So while yes, there is the economic cost which has been handed out for the economy, the cost would have been far higher if the lockdown had come later on. And that's something that we would have had to settle on in terms of where we are getting the impact of the lockdown. The other problem is that unless and until, given that we have got limited resources, we would not have been able to face the full face of this pandemic without getting the space to create, which has been created by now. It's now, as you can see, that the states are going along on different tangents, which is necessary, depending on how their hotspots are. But that space for the states to have gone in now, which they are going in, would not have been available if the initial period of the lockdown hadn't really happened from March 22nd.
Let's bring in Dr. Trehan. So we've built a lot of capacity, Dr. Trehan, in this period of time. We have now 755 dedicated COVID hospitals. We have 1,389 dedicated COVID health centers. And I'm sure, you know, the private sector will also be willing to ramp up if necessary, if it ever reaches that stage. So we are way ahead in terms of, you know, the capacity and the number of people who are occupying these over 170,000 beds that we have. So, you know, I mean, are we, if we look at this capacity, one would say we can open up a little bit of the economy because we have this kind of thing to fall back on if people do get ill and, you know, maybe impose another lockdown. Is that a wise way of looking at things?
Well, you're right in the sense that most definitely the fact that so much capacity has been created gives us some comfort. Definitely this was what was required, and that has happened in this lockdown period, because we would not have been prepared for the onslaught if we didn't have this period to the elbow room that it has given us. It has done several things. One, there has been a lot of dialogue between the government and the industry and the private sector and the healthcare providers, which is a very good thing because it has brought the country together, and the barriers that existed before have been broken down, and you can see the result that everybody is working in tandem, realizing that this is a war which is countrywide, which is everybody's war, every citizen's war, and we must fight it together. So many things have happened. Like you said, the bed capacity has been created, the ventilators and the PPEs and all that, and our dependence on imports has also gone down hugely, which is also a big comfort. Now, when the onslaught comes, when we unlock, the main thing that we need to be careful about is in what graded manner we open with what preparation. I'll give you an example. When a shop floor opens in a factory, how are we checking our people coming in? How are we segregating them on the shop floor? What responsibility they show so that there is distancing and masking always present, and that people do not break down these safety features that we have prescribed. If that happens, then I'm sure that even when the onslaught comes, it will be blunted. It won't be like mass infection going through this whole system. So I think the first step is very important, that graded opening is happening now of the green zones.
Yes.
The red zones are absolutely locked up still. The will of the administration to keep the lockdown in a very secure manner will help us. And I think that as we have to open up, and if this experience of the next 7 days is encouraging, that this opening up has not caused huge damage in the sense of spread of infection, then we will have the courage to go to the next step.
Absolutely.
But I'll tell you that each industry will have its own peculiarities.
Okay.
Like we've been now discussing how to open up the aviation sector, and medically, what are the things that we can prescribe to minimize the risk of traveling. So now we have said, okay, distancing, personal protection, which should be designed for air travelers, which we are doing that now. Shop floors of factories,
Okay.
the mandis, all these things are being thought through, and if they are implemented and the social distancing that is prescribed and masking takes place, hopefully we will get a very favorable outcome of this devastating malady, which
Okay.
has actually affected the world and brought it down on its knees. So
Right.
hopefully this is the determination of the government and the public sector and the private sector to fight this together has been a huge unifying factor.
Right.
And I think going forward, we'll have a much stronger healthcare system, which India always needed.
Shubham Bhattacharya, what would you see as the work culture? It has to change, isn't it, now, for everybody who would be starting work with the threat or the fear that there is no cure for this virus as yet. And, you know, as Dr. Trehan was saying, they are already working, you know, with almost all sectors to find out new ways to see how these sectors can start with a certain kind of medical preparedness in the background. Would you say that that was going to be the norm then for almost everything, or would you see certain unorganized sectors like in our country finding it difficult under these circumstances?
Some sectors definitely are going to be hugely challenged. I mean, they're opening them up, and most of it is going to be in the services sector.
Okay.
The manufacturing sector is relatively easier to handle. It's machine based. It works even in the unorganized sector. A manufacturing process, there is a certain sequence of people sitting in steps that is not, extremely sort of one on top, I mean, touch
Yes.
feel sort of thing.
Yes.
But in services sector, especially you can think of anything, travel, tourism, any sort of sector that you can think of in services is going to have a mighty difficult time trying to work out what is a social distancing and how to maintain it at all times. And I suspect there is going to be, that is where the chance of a blowback is going to be huge.
Okay.
Because it's very difficult to work out what is the exact norm, even in the green zones. So, and that's a challenge that's not just in India, but across the world.
That's right. But best practices will be shared. I mean, we can see
Best practice
that.
will be shared, and that is where the challenge would be in terms of giving what and considering the fact that we are a services heavy
economy,
dependent
yeah.
economy. So this is certainly a big one. The manufacturing sector actually is a much easier beast to handle. There you know what you can do, and it's so much more easy to work out rules of spacing. For instance, many of the factories have worked out systems that people give an hour's gap between those who are coming in one shift and the next shift. It's not that easy in the services sector.
Sure.
And that is where we shall have to be working out, as you say,
Okay.
working out new rule books as they go along.
Dr. Trehan, so we've been talking a little bit about comfort levels. In a sense, our preparedness has provided us with a comfort level to try and open the economy a little bit. But, the real comfort level comes when we have a cure for this virus. And apparently there's a lot that is happening behind the scenes that people are not too aware of because of the various stages of trials, etc. But, even with the medication that is available, there seems to be some success rate. We are seeing a number of people being cured. In fact, a majority of the people who are even getting infected, they have mild symptoms. Are we, looking at this, is this a very positive sign in a sense that this virus is not as threatening as we make it out to be?
I'm not sure that the virus is not as threatening, but the fact is that India has gained some time. The virus arriving in India has been relatively later than the rest of the world in the sense of China, Europe, USA, Canada. So the start of the whole thing, started a little later in India, but India reacted very fast. So the government clamped down right away as we had about 550 cases or something. So that has actually given us a long window where we have a big advantage. Why? Because things that were, the repurposing the drugs which were already on the shelf,
Yes.
like hydroxychloroquine or some of the antiviral drugs that we have been using, how successfully, actually, if you take a larger patient base, we'll know conclusively, but initially it seems to show a lot of advantage to us. Second is the fact that in the meantime, the drugs that were re-engineered for this COVID have now reached advanced stage of phase 3 trials. That means now that the Gilead is the company which has actually developed remdesivir. It has reached a end of trial in US at the end of this month, hopefully, and in China. And also they have given a portion of this drug to WHO to start studies in different countries, and India is one of the lead countries. So it is approved for India clinical trials, and I hope these clinical trials will start very soon. So if we have the benefit of all these things that are developed around the world, and also some encouraging news about the vaccine coming very quickly in the next few months or 6 months, these are all things that are in favor of India.
Absolutely.
Now, does the BCG vaccination increase the immunity or increases enough antibodies against this? The second is the fact that does the weather help? Now, all these are unknown factors, but there is early evidence that the medicines and BCG may be an important factor in how rampant it will be in India and how mild the symptoms may be. So I have no doubt that many people will get infected. But what is our ultimate today? Today, if you look at it from the experience that we have with all the people who have gotten sick, very small percentage of them are on ventilators.
That's right.
So if you look at it in one of the leading government hospitals, I got the data, there are about 150 patients and only 3 are on the ventilator. This seems to be echoed around the country, that the number of people getting that sick and dying is still low. So hopefully this trend will continue and we will come out ahead of it. And like we said, 2 benefits will come. One is the fact that our Indian manufacturers have risen to the occasion.
Yes.
We will have less and less dependence on other countries, which is a very good fact. And the other is that our healthcare system will become more robust to even offer help, which was actually not up to the mark. We will then have a better healthcare system unified between government and private sector, and we will be able to serve our public much better in the coming years than we were able to.
Shubham Bhattacharjee, we are less and less dependent on other countries, is what Dr. Trehan says. But we are actually helping a lot of countries. I mean, we are basically becoming, in a sense, saviors with hydroxychloroquine, which was under control for a while, and then we allowed it to be given to now 50 countries of the world. Apart from that, in our neighborhood, the SAARC countries, we are going out of our way to help. In this kind of attitude at this time sends a very positive signal that the world is basically standing united, and this is the best way to fight this virus, isn't it? And India is setting a very good example.
Absolutely, and I hope that the fact that we are now able to produce something which is useful and export it takes away a lot of our squeamishness, our traditional squeamishness about dealing with the rest of the world on trade. It has been one of our Achilles heel, and we have one of the reasons why we have not been able to produce good drugs or good medical equipments in large scale till this pandemic came along was because of the fact that it was just the domestic market, and essentially our trade with the rest of the world was weak. In fact, in API, we are the largest exporters to Africa.
Yes.
But that is the sort of stuff that we have not really been building up heavily. And hopefully this experience will be a very positive experience for industry chambers to agree that there is a need for opening up India to be able to take advantage of opportunities that come along. I mean, look at the way that the Indian companies, because they have the ability, they were able to quickly cotton on to that opportunity of exporting hydroxychloroquine. That's the sort of stuff that we need to do, rather than be always scared about the fact that we are going to be overwhelmed. We shouldn't we shouldn't have too much of dealings with the rest of the world. It doesn't help. It actually is helping. I mean, as you said, we are getting brownie points because of the fact that we are exporting. When we export, we naturally will be needing some raw materials to be able to build those, which is great and fine, and that is what we need to. Essentially, India, I mean, this pandemic is giving us the opportunity to reset our trade button, and I think that will be a lesson that will be very well learned.
So, Dr. Trehan, well, I mean, that's an interesting point to discuss, because this you did say that it's brought the world to its knees, but Shubham Bhattacharjee sees this as a reset button where India can actually have certain advantages. And with this response that the government has put in place, a certain graded response where we have learnt from experience, and you being a foremost member of the medical fraternity, and taking India's medicine across the world, what would you say? I mean, is this an opportunity, at least in terms of medicine, for the rest of the world, for India?
So if you look historically, Indian doctors have actually risen to the top anywhere in the world. They are the leaders, and not from now, for many years. I spent 20 years in New York. We know what our status is internationally for Indian doctors. But our manufacturing and ability to do research and create that ecosystem in our country to match
Yes.
the world was actually lacking. That is why the medicines, we were always called the copycat country, that we would only do reverse engineering of medicines that came off patent and produce cheaper generic drugs very efficiently, and it served the purpose at that time. But now is the time India has come together and there is impetus. We have the opportunity to create this base of doing research and development in medicines, in biology, in biotech, and other enabling things like medical equipment and stuff like that. And India has, in a very short time, the people of India have innovated very quickly. You should see what we have been able to produce. A ventilator which is very efficient for a lakh and a half of rupees. Can
Okay.
you imagine? You can rule the world with this. So there is one rule. Whatever is good for India is good for 4 billion people around us. Because those people are equal in our economic strength, or they are much below us. So they need all this stuff. So this is this is the silver lining of this very bad disease that has hit us.
Yes.
But it is also up to us now how we seize the opportunity. China dependence should become less. You know what's happening. There are things that are produced in China that are of such poor quality but exported with such pizzazz that HLL, which was the buying agency for all these PPEs, has found a large number of the imports were of inferior quality or no
Yes,
quality.
Dr. Trehan.
So these are the things that we must pay attention to. And the government must help our industry, must help our MSMEs to actually rise to the occasion and take the advantage. The world is looking at India.
Okay.
If this moment will not come again, and hopefully not,
Absolutely.
because this moment has come as a byproduct of a very devastating disease.
And
But
on that, on that hopeful note, I think that's a good time to close this discussion. Thank you very much, Dr. Trehan and Shubhomay Bhattacharjee. So the world is looking at